in about 15 seconds with the myth, the man, the legend, Dan Martell. If you want to join us live as usual, you can do so, sellerroundtable.com/live. You can join us in the Zoom meeting, ask questions, participate, all that fun stuff. And we're about to get going. All right, I'm going to remember to record, Amy, I promise.
I'll back you up.
Oh, perfect. Here we go. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Andy Arnott with
Amy Weiss.
And this is the Seller Roundtable. We are super stoked, excited, very, very happy to have the myth, the man, the legend, Dan Martell on. He's an entrepreneur, a coach, an Ironman, a dog owner, a dad, and what else? What else am I missing, Dan?
Passionate snowboarder, philanthropist, brother. I try to be best friends to as many people as possible. Yeah, man, I'm just trying to live life.
And snow biker, right? You had a
Hardcore
video. I was flipping through videos one day, and one of you riding came up, and my oldest, who's 10 years old, is a super avid dirt biker, and he saw that, and his jaw literally dropped, and he was like, "What is that?" So we're gonna have to check that out. I'm gonna let him get a little older though, because I'm terrified that he'll hurt himself. Because he's
if you let him on a dirt bike, snow biking is way safer.
All right, well, that's good to know. Okay, good to know.
Because of the padding,
because of the snow. Like everybody search timber sled online, you'll see what these machines look. They look like as if the devil created a motorbike, right? They're gnarly looking, but you're in deep powder, and like the consequence for me, like I cannot ride a dirt bike because you can go from like 0 to out of control in about 4 seconds. And but with the snow bike, like it's flowy and launching cliffs and powder drops, and it's one of my favorite things. Like it'd be a toss up if you made me pick between like wake surfing or snow biking. I'd be like, oh, don't know which one.
All right, cool. Well, I'm gonna have to green light him on that one. My son, the first time he went snowboarding, went down a black diamond on his own by mistake, and like did great. So I guess we'll green light that. So Dan, one of the things that I really kind of love about your journey is your kind of early story on how you kind of came from some hard knocks and some tough times, and really kind of I guess you would say you sharpened the stone in terms of, start out a little rough and just kind of kept buffing it. Tell people your early story and how those kind of trials and tribulations kind of made you where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, like I grew up in, it's kind of funny because like it's more the feeling I had. A lot of people have different background stories, but I'm second oldest of 4. My mom was an alcoholic. She grew up, adopted to alcoholic parents, my grandparents, and like my dad, same thing. Both his parents were alcoholics, and like he had that in his environment. And just like, I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 11. Kind of started telling myself that I was broken, like really didn't have a lot of self-worth, and started acting out in like anger issues and like just uncontrollable rage sometimes. And my parents we went to therapy. Like they put me on Ritalin, and I just was always troubled. I got taken out of my home the first time when I was 12, just because I was like just crazy. I was just like full of anger and rage. Got put into like crisis centers and group homes, and and then I got introduced to drugs when I was like 13, and then I just like went all in. I have kind of a addictive personality, and ended up in trouble with the law quite a few times, probation, shoplifting, etc., hanging around with the wrong people, and kind of my life spiraled out of control to a point when I was 16. I was drunk and high in a stolen car, and I had a handgun in a bag sitting next to me. And when I stole the car, the cops were looking for me, and I just told myself that if they catch me, I'm just going to point the gun and let them take my life. And ended up on this highway heading the wrong directions. I wasn't very clever, and took a exit to get some gas, and there was a routine roadblock checking driver's license and insurance. And I lied to the cops, told them it was my mom's car, and they asked me to pull over, and I just gunned it and just took off. Ended up in this neighborhood, kind of ahead of the cops, actually. And then I found like this open garage door and thought, maybe I watched too many action movies. If I could like hide in that door and like close the garage and get away or whatever. And I ended up smashing into the corner of the house because I was coming in way too fast. And by the time I came through, I like immediately went for the gun. It was just like, all right. And I like was pulling on it, and somehow it got stuck in the like the string and the cover of the top of the backpack and like the armrest. And like I just kept pulling on it and pulling on it. And before I knew it, the police opened the door and just unbuckled me and grabbed me. I wasn't buckled. What am I talking about? They just grabbed me and threw me in the back of the cop car. And I woke up the next morning sober, just couldn't believe I was still alive, and just realized like maybe there's somebody in a higher power looking out for me. And that was the beginning of a crazy journey. I ended up doing 6 months in prison due to the severity of my crimes. It hadn't been the first time. I actually went a year prior. And after 6 months of like trying to show that I was serious about getting clean and changing my life, they allowed me to go to a place called Portage, which is a therapeutic community, a rehab center, but it was like a live-in. And I ended up doing 11 months of therapy. So like I had some demons, man. I had some trauma and some messed up issues, relationships. But that was a place where I like did a ton of personal development. I didn't call it that then. It was like, anger management meetings and feelings development, and like, reconciling, relationships with my parents and trust with my brothers and sisters, and like learning some new habits. And at the end of that program, I actually, and it all ties back to my new book and kind of what do I do today. But at the end of that program, I was helping Rick, the maintenance guy, clean out one of the camps because it was built on an old church camp. And there was this cabin that we'd never been in, and it was full of stuff, and we're taking it out. And in one of the rooms was this old 486 computer and a book on Java programming, this yellow book sitting right next to it. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And I like opened up the book and it read like English. And I was like, oh, I always thought I never touched a computer, but I just assumed it was like super scientific math equations. And it's like, if this, then that. And I was like, oh, weird. So I started the computer and kind of followed chapter 1. And within 20 minutes, I got the computer to say, hello world. And I thought, holy shit, man, maybe I'm a undiscovered computer genius. Like that's how crazy like that moment was for me. I was like, and it was not based on any sound logic or like any like, but that it didn't matter. Like I literally was like, oh, maybe I'm messed up in other parts of my brain, but this is the thing I'm really good at. And I just never knew that. So I just believed this, and it became my new addiction, man. I can't even explain it. And like, I became so obsessed with writing code. And there was this aspect of like writing software that felt, predictable. Like I had grown up in so much uncertainty and chaos that like this like work of creating something that would always run as long as like I created it right, it would just always run, just felt like really therapeutic for me. And I got out, it was 1997, and I quickly discovered this thing called the internet. And it turned out to be kind of a big deal. And timing, divine intervention, I don't know, like it was all I did. I literally became obsessed with learning every internet programming language, every database structure, every architecture thing. Started several companies, a lot of them failed. But then today, looking back, for people that may not know kind of what I do today, but I've built and exited several software companies. I became a multimillionaire when I was 28. So my first company, Spheric Technologies, and then subsequently that went to Silicon Valley, built 2 venture-backed companies, Flowtown and Clarity. I'm an investor in 50 plus software companies, Udemy, Hootsuite, billion-dollar companies. Today I run the largest software as a service coaching program, as you know, Andy, for SaaS CEOs. And then I also have High Speed Ventures, which is like my personal kind of like holdings investment vehicle. It's like my family office for kind of multiplying my wealth. And that's just like 2 things I do. I'm the CEO of 2 8-figure companies. And then I also, as you mentioned, run Ironmans. I did 3 this year, full distance and 2 halves. I, charge hard at life. I try to show up in the most powerful way as I can, and be a great example for my family and for all the kids that were just like me, paying attention, because, working with at-risk youth is a big part of my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you definitely you spent some time in Kona, where I grew up, which is an amazing place, but I was never, never could do. I'd watch all the people run by and be like, "Holy crap!" Right? So, cheers, kudos to you for doing that. That's hardcore. A few things I want to touch on that I think is kind of interesting. One is addictive personality and personal development, right? I think a lot of people, grow up with parents who have, addictions, as parents, that's always a struggle in terms of, trying to model what's right to your kids. Um, but I think that what you figured out early on that I think a lot of people need to figure out is with the addictive personality thing is you can be addicted to whatever you want, right? So you can be addicted to drinking, or you can be addicted to working out, or you can be addicted to meditation, or, all these things that if you're addicted to are not necessarily a bad thing. So I think that you figured that out really early on. The other thing I think you figured out early on, with as hard as probably all of those things were, is that personal development, right? So that's ability to go inside and see that, like, okay, here's the issues that I have going on. I have to solve this before anything else in my life is going to work. The other thing is that you share that story. A lot of people would be like, not wanting to share that story. A lot of people don't want to share their failures. A lot of people don't want to share, the stuff that they're going through. And I think that's some of the stuff we need to share the most, because so many other people are kind of in the closet with having all these kinds of issues and not being able to share them, confront them, even with some of their, some of their people. So,
well, let me share this, Andy. I appreciate it, but what a lot of people don't realize is for 15 years, okay, till I was, what would that be, 17, so 32, until I was 32 years old, and I'd already at that point, exited 2 companies, right? And for a lot of people, considered successful. And I never shared that story, dude. My wife didn't even know. Okay. And she was pregnant. What happened was my buddy, Jason Gaynard, he has this event called Mastermind Talks, or MMT, today, but this was the very first MMT, 8 years ago or 9 years ago, whenever it started. And what happened is I was supposed to do a talk on like work-life balance. And the morning of my talk, which was in the afternoon, he goes, "Hey, I just want you to know, Dan, whoever wins best talk as voted by the audience, will get a $25,000 donation to the charity of their choice." And for me, that was Portage, the rehab center that saved my life. And I remember as soon as he said that, I went, well, this is, Tim Ferriss, Mark Echo, like the speaker lineup was crazy. And I just was like, there's no way I'm going to win this unless I share something absolutely like raw. And I left the event at 11, went to my hotel room, sat down, sketched a draft version that honestly, it was embarrassing in hindsight. But what was true is when I went on stage, my wife pulls me aside before I go up and she goes, "Hey, Dan, I got a surprise." I was like, "What's that?" She goes, "My parents are in town. They wanted to come surprise you and watch your talk." And I was like, "Can you do me a favor and just ask them to like have time and stick around?" And she's like, "Why?" I go, "I'm going to share something I haven't shared with you or anybody. And I think they're probably going to want to talk afterwards." She's like, "What are you going to talk about?" And I was like, "I just need to go do this. Let me do this." Right. And it's cool part. It's like recorded. And I just went up there and just like poured my soul out there and shared, and even deeper levels of like a few stories about like foster care and like, getting in a fight in prison and putting in the hole, and like, just like the emotional challenges that became the foundation for who I was, right? Like rock bottom, you've heard, a lot of people have heard this, is a great foundation for a comeback story. So, dude, I didn't win. Now that would have made the story just the best, right? I came in second. I know. I always say like, "Jason, you should have let me give you 25 grand so that I could honestly say that I won 25 grand just to make the story better." But my buddy, Joey Coleman, he's just a world-class speaker. He won. I came in second, but that was even though as scared as I was, and like, dude, I was shaking, like, but when I came off stage, Tim Ferriss comes up to me and he goes, we had known each other through the San Francisco network. And he goes, "I've never seen anybody share with that much honesty." And he goes, "It's really great to know who you really are." And I was like, wow. Like, and then this other guy, Cameron Harold, comes up to me. He goes, "Dan, that's the kind of stuff I like to know about people. And I appreciate you sharing that with me." And then I had other people that pulled me aside and said, "Hey man, I can't, I don't want, please keep this between us," and then share their version, right? The drinking and driving, the, went to prison for 2 years. Like nobody knew. I'm the first person they ever told because I shared. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I want to connect with people like that. And if it requires me to go first and to be vulnerable and like pour myself out there, as awkward it is. And like, I was so scared. I was like, what if my investors find out? And like, what are my friends going to think? And like, so I just share that because I think a lot of people are fearful and scared. And I was for 15 years. And I will tell you, and it wasn't without repercussions. The other thing is I was working on a US visa and I got denied because I have a criminal record, even though I don't have a record, but because I have a public story of me telling the story of breaking the law. When I filled out the visa application, it has a checkbox. It says, have you ever have you ever had a crime? Do you ever like do a crime? I had to put yes, which meant I needed to go get a pardon. Dude, it took me an extra $50,000 in legal fees and psychiatric assessments and letters of recommendation to overcome that. So like, it wasn't with downside, I'm sure, but the upside was like 1,000 times better. So like, I appreciate you sharing that, but yeah, just to be honest, it took 15 years.
But that's still, I mean, to me, better late than never, right? There's a lot of people that will never share that, will go to their deathbed with stuff that they don't share. So thank you for sharing that. Like I said, I feel like when people do that, it gives other people permission, exactly like you said, to be like, oh shit, that happened to me too. And, it kind of gives them permission. So I really appreciate that you share that. Yes, the other thing is Canadians, right? It's you guys are dangerous, so it doesn't
so dangerous.
It doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me that you had to go through all.
Didn't hurt my feelings. I got it. We're still stone cold killers. You look at me and you're like, that guy's sketchy. I get it. It's my fault.
Absolutely.
And I want to know, was it worth it?
100%. 100%.
Yeah. I love that. I love, how vulnerable and raw, you can be in sharing everything, because it really reminds people that, we are all people, we are all humans. And, so much of us put a certain portrait out there to the public, but we aren't really sharing who we truly are. And that's just such a beautiful thing. So shifting over to systems, Andy here is the one who introduced me to the great Dan Martell. We came to one of your SAAS masterminds in I think we were in Atlanta, Georgia at the time.
Atlanta, yeah, that would have been February 2019, right before COVID.
Man, you have a good memory. Yes,
I know. I do new cities for all my events, so I can kind of anchor.
Oh, that's so smart.
Yeah.
Well, I love systems. I spent a long time in the military, doing operations, and I absolutely love systems. But I loved so much the way that you broke down systems and you made systems easy. You really simplified them, the way you had us drawing the triangle and breaking things down and making things simple. So I would just love to ask you, for our audience who are intimidated by systems, what are systems and how can they help your business grow?
Yeah. So like what happened is like software became the addiction that got me focused on a completely different like area and skill set and career and all that stuff. But taking that to the business world and like now understanding, well, what's the equivalent of code in a business, right? It turns out it's what a lot of people call SOPs, standard operating procedures, but I call them playbooks in my book, Buy Back Your Time. So the playbooks, and I honestly, I got to give credit to the godfather of this, which is Michael Gerber. He wrote the book, The E-Myth. There's the Checklist Manifesto. There's Work the System by Sam Carpenter. There's like, I've studied all the greats, but for me, there's a point where, $1 million companies are not built on $10 tasks. It's just impossible. Like you just don't have enough hours in the day. So you have to hire people to help you. And without creating a system, and it's a skill set to document and create these systems, you won't be able to comfortably feel that somebody else can execute the thing that you're asking them to do at your level, right? Without a checklist, without some structure and maybe some training, it can feel super nerve-wracking. Like the delegation can cause more anxiety and mental anguish than actually the time saved for a lot of people. And that's why a lot of people just say, well, I'll just do this myself, right? But it's if you want more, you got to become more. So you have to learn how this works. And for me, it's just as simple as a checklist, right? If I was to sit down and teach somebody how to, clean my office or process my emails, I would just make a checklist of what I'm doing. Right. And then, and in my book, I actually teach this process. I think it's even easier than that, which is called the camcorder method, where I record myself. And like in today's world, every one of my meetings on Zoom are recorded and they're cataloged, and different meetings get cataloged for different things. But a lot of them is because they become training for the person that I hire to take over that area of my life. Right. So like when I'm doing things like social media publishing, like anything you see me on social media doing, and like I'm all over TikTok, 500,000 followers, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I did it all myself and then created these SOPs, just writing down what I was doing. So like Monday I would publish and it would take me 5 hours. I literally would start at 8 a.m. and it would take me 5 hours to like do it all, right? Write the copy, write the email, write the thing, schedule this, do that, publish, upload, blah, 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 like all over, and the only thing I wasn't doing that was just editing. I was at least smart enough to buy back that time. But within 2 months, I had a documented process that I could give to my, at the time, executive assistant, and she could execute it. And all of a sudden I got 6 hours of my day back. And it wasn't like, there's nothing sophisticated about that, but there is like some art to it. Like I would say art, science, right? One of my favorite books on the topic, if people are listening and they're like super system nerds, it's called The Goal by Elad Goldsmith. I think it's called his name. And it's one of 3 books that Jeff Bezos from Amazon recommends to every one of his executives or directors or leaders. Right. And it's all about understanding how systems work. Right. And it's based on this like fable of this guy that takes over the management of a manufacturing shop and like how to like get more throughput. And like, I like it because my software background gives me an unfair advantage, because if you think of like database architecture, if anybody's familiar with it, it's like you're creating the data structure to then map to the object model that then maps to the front end interface. And if all that sounds like Chinese, I'm sorry, but because I've learned how to do that and decouple things, then when I sit down to create systems, I'm like, okay, this is the checklist, but these are the ingredients. So this needs to be done. This is more creative work. This is procedural work. This stuff requires a specialist. This requires a generalist. And like, I have just this like sixth sense for how I do it. And I try to teach it as much as I can in one chapter in the book, but it's through systems and creating repeatability that you can actually scale. And that's when you create a business that's actually an asset and not just a job, right? For a lot of people, their business is just and for most entrepreneurs, a very low paying job for the amount of hours they work.
And I love how you are putting it into your own language in the way that you've explained it. So, you talked about the E-Myth. I love that book. You talked about a lot of great books, people who came before your book that, that have done this. But the key, I think, of what you said, if I take anything away from it, is that you put it into a language that made sense for you, where, you understood the language of software, you understood programming. And so, if then, hey, we're making that happen, right? But I think that's what every entrepreneur has to do, is put it into their own language and keep it simple. And that's what you taught us at your mastermind, is like, be able to explain it, and here's some structure that you can put it within, right? And I think that can help reduce the amount of anxiety that somebody might have around a system. But yeah, you're so right. It really does. It can change everything if you can do it yourself and then outsource it after that. But at the same time, put it into your own language and keep it simple, right?
Yeah. And I follow it. Like, I'm also like, I create the procedure and then I use it when I'm doing it. Like, these are some of my core cultural beliefs and principles, even amongst my team. Like, if there's a procedure that exists for the thing you're doing and you don't have it open, that's against the culture of our company. The thing, and what I love, like, even your experience with me, like teaching from stage, like that was, I'm a big fan of just like paying for the blueprint. Like, I hired an E-Myth coach when I was 23, almost 24, before I started my third company, which is finally the one that succeeded. And I was paying $1,500 a month for a business coach when I didn't even have a business idea, because I just had failed twice. I was like, okay, I'm willing to do the work. So it's not like a work ethic problem. It's I clearly don't know what I'm doing and I want to move fast. So I like read the E-Myth and I was like, okay, that is something I was not doing. Let me find somebody who can help me. I got a coach, this guy named Bob. And what happened for me is like, I just started building this like feedback loop on like how to move faster. And coaching, like you talk about like me on stage, like I hired a coach to teach me how to do that. Like there's actual like a thing called adult learning theory and how to use, drawings to draw people in and communicate information. And, these tests of like, can the person walk away and teach what you just taught them to somebody else? And like at what level of comprehension, and, like what are the different components of a great training module? And like, so even though, I appreciate the praises, I'm a remix of everybody that went before me. I'm just like super no ego. Teach
I think
me.
that's key though, is to, to seek out mentors. And then, I just got back from a Tony Robbins event, and he teaches a success formula where he's like, you just need a recipe, right? You need a recipe for success. And so he talks about how he hired all these different coaches over the years, and he was just a sponge of information. He learned from as many books as he could, and he took different things that made sense for him. So I love it. I think it's awesome.
I'm actually a big TR fan. I'm actually I just got back from Date with Destiny.
I'm actually doing that starting Friday. So
okay, well, I'm going to that one, but this is only getting published then. So you and I are in the same wavelength. Yes, I'll be there. I'm actually going to be in studio in his like $20 million studio, which is going to be nuts.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
I'll look for you.
Okay. So Dan, in the book you talk about, and this follows right with what you were, what you're talking about right now is, your learn, do, teach, right? So, I think that's amazing in the fact that, like you said, well, I stole it from a bunch of people, but that's how you get to the next level, right? You see what people before you have done, at least the people who actually get somewhere. You see what's been done before you. You see what they did right and what they did wrong, and then you iterate, right? So I think that's an amazing principle to go by. Eric Thomas, who's another amazing speaker. If you guys don't know who Eric Thomas is,
E.T. the hip hop preacher, Eric Thomas.
Oh man, I love him. If I want to get like hyped up, because he screams a lot, right? So if I want to get hyped up, I put him on in the car, like on the way to the gym or whatever. But he always says, rich people don't waste time. They know that it's their most important commodity, right? So I feel like buy back your time definitely kind of, it's like an exact perfect match for that mantra in terms of, if you're doing $10 an hour tasks, you can only get so far. It's funny because I've been an entrepreneur for a very long time. I've failed a ton. I know what not to do a lot more probably than what to do. And my wife is becoming a very amazing real estate agent, but she's starting to build teams and do things like that. And it's funny because she'll come to me and I'll be like, oh, you should be doing this, this, and this. And she'll like, kind of fights me a little bit and then kind of sees like, oh, okay, that's good. But then she does it her own way, right? She sees, kind of takes the input. She's been watching a lot of you actually lately. So takes a lot of that input and then implements it. So, we only have, an hour here, but what are some of the main points that you can drive home in terms of, I'm Joe Schmo. I just started my ice cream truck business. And, I really want to know, I have a line down the corner and I don't know what to do next. I'm getting home at 10 o'clock at night. I'm exhausted. My kids are pulling at the dog needs to be fed. Dinner needs to be made. Like what kind of things can people learn from the book that are going to be invaluable?
Yeah. I mean, I start off the book, not only sharing stories, but like what I realized I had to attack the mindsets and the beliefs, right? You talked about like rich people understand the value of their time. Well, it's because they have a belief that they're worthy of that. A lot of people don't feel worthy. That worthiness is at the core of like them not moving forward in any of these ideas in the book, right? Like having somebody help you clean your house to meal prep and all this stuff. It's like, I can do that. And they just don't have a lot of self-worth. If let's just assume that like some of those beliefs were, overcome, the tactical stuff I teach that I think is unique is one, the buyback rate, like helping people understand what is your hour actually worth in your current business. Okay. What I call the buyback rate. And then once you know that, then go do a time and energy audit, right? Because I believe that like, I want to help people, build businesses they don't grow to hate, which is what happens. Most people grow a business and then they hit this thing called the pain line. And that pain line, they'll either decide to sell, stall, or sabotage, right? They'll either sabotage themselves smaller so because they can handle that, it hurts less, or they can like stall, but they're not really stalling because their customers want more, their team wants more. So like they think they're stalling, but they're just eventually failing. Or sell because it's like, oh, the grass is greener. I'm going to sell this company, go to this other thing. But like they're the problem. Like somebody in your business has made this work. So if that's true, then it can work. You just haven't figured it out. So once you understand the buyback rate and you have the time and energy audit, you now can like select all the tasks that are low dollar tasks for somebody else to support you on that suck your energy. And that creates this bucket of stuff that you now have to learn the skill, what I call in the buyback loop, which is audit, transfer, and fill. Audit your time, which is time and energy audit. Transfer is understanding some of these strategies, like Amy, you mentioned, the playbooks, and like I teach this framework called the camcorder method, and the course and the checklist and the cadence, and like, so there's that. And then honestly, even just fill, right, Andy? It's like, imagine I said to the people listening, like, okay, poof, magically you got 2 days extra a week. Thursday, Friday's free. You don't have to work. You've got somebody else doing that stuff. What do you do with your time? They wouldn't know. That's the truth. I'll tell you what they'll do because I've seen them do it over and over. They'll call their friends, go for lunch, get on Netflix, drag their feet, go to the gym late, like approach their day with zero sense of urgency, right? Like I want to teach people to approach their day as if they were flying out the next day. Most people are the most productive the day before they have to travel. Okay. It's a forcing function. So you just got to figure out how to create that sense of movement. And the fill part, which I think is like, hopefully should inspire people. It's one of 4 things. You're either doing more of the thing in your business that makes you the most money. And if you have an ice cream truck, maybe it's selling ice cream, right? Or maybe it's partnering or finding other opportunities to sell more ice cream. Maybe it's doing a retail deal. It may not be selling more ice cream. You might be at capacity. So it's like, okay, buy back your time from making the ice cream. And then now all of a sudden you get that time back, go fill it with things that are gonna make you more money. Well, go to the local grocery store to see if you can get your ice cream in pint size in their displays. And then if it's not that, then it's skill. Okay, what skill? So here's where I'm at. Here's this future I want to attain. What's the gap in skill that I currently don't have that would be required to achieve that? Most people don't realize that they're just not capable to handle the level of complexity that future state is going to bring, right? And you see this all the time with like lottery winners and sports athletes. Like, poof, you now have $10 million in bank account. They have not acquired the skill to manage that level of wealth. And with that, in 2 or 3 years, it is gone magically every time. And they go like, how did that happen? It's because you tried to skip levels, right? So it's like building those skills. Third is mindset and beliefs, right? Like, how do we feed our mind and our belief sets and like really work on that trauma and our default response? I have a whole chapter in the book called the 5 time assassins, because I realized like entrepreneurs, even if they don't buy back time, if they just stop doing these 5 time assassins, they'll actually get more time. So I wanted to start by telling you how to get time without spending $1 and teach you how to fill it. And then if you start to do that, you should trust me to then actually deploy some real money. And then the 4th one is relationships, right? Like at the end of the day, if I've got extra time in my calendar, I should ask myself, this future place I want to get to, what are the relationships I would probably need to have to make that journey enjoyable and easier? And start today to invest in those relationships. And if you're an introvert and you're like, I don't want to, go in person and to events, hey, start with Twitter, start with Instagram, start with whatever. I mean, I've built relationships with people that left comments on my YouTube videos or sent me emails or whatever. Like the author that wrote the first book I ever read, Tim Sanders, we were email friends for 10 years. Okay. And he helped me out and gave me guidance and all these things. So like relationships is a big area. And if you do that and you keep trading these time trades, that's how you buy back your time and create. The more you grow, the more your life gets better, not harder. Right. And you don't end up hitting the pain line. And that's like the mission I'm on, the movement I'm trying to create in the world is I want to help more entrepreneurs create their art. I want them to do more in the world. And that's why the subtitle of the books, and build your empire, right? Get unstuck, reclaim your freedom, and build your empire. I actually want to encourage people to not 4-hour work week it, but like learn this stuff so that you have more capacity to give.
Yeah, I love that. So one of the things that I kind of was thinking about as you're talking is you're saying, you know, if you're flying out the next day that you get things done. What I've figured out is on my calendar, if I'm like back to back to back to back to back stacked, right? Like if I have something to do with every minute of every day, I'm getting things done, right? Because it's just you have intention. You're starting out the day with intention. And those days where I have these kind of gaps, I'm, you know, like you said, I get distracted and I just kind of float off. It's unintentional. It's not like I don't have these goals that I'm setting. And it's very similar to, I think it's called Parkinson's law, right? Where it's like in your bank accounts, like if you leave a bunch of money in there, you're going to spend it. Or if, you know, if you peel some off and like put it in a different account, you're not looking at it, stock account, whatever, you know, you're going to use what's there or what's not there. So that's absolutely spot on. The other kind of mantra, you know, I've been following you for quite a long time is JFDI, right? Can you kind of tell people what that is and how I think that it can be a blessing and a curse, right? Because if you're not intentional, once again, with that, you got to have, you know, you got to do some aiming before you just fire. So can you talk about that and how that's kind of driven your success and kind of the mantra of what you do every day?
Yeah, like so on my McLaren, my license plate says JFDI. Okay. And it's a reminder because it's so important to my life. In my manifesto, it's in the bottom right corner. Like JFDI is kind of like this philosophy I created because a long time ago, I had a friend of mine, I was in my 20s. He said, Dan, you know what's different about you? I said, what's that? His name was Gare. He goes, you have no, what he called knowing doing gap. So what do you mean? He goes, when you know something, he said, I teach you something and you go, oh, got it. And then you just like, you stop talking to me and you run away. And then I'll meet you a week later and you're like, hey, thanks for that thing. And here's what it's doing in my business. He goes, you know, I tell this stuff to people all the time and they don't do anything with it. And he goes, that's very unique about you. And I was like, oh, well, I just don't have time to waste. And it sounds like a good idea. I'm going to do stuff. And like the whole idea of like shooting. And then I read Good to Great by Jim Collins. And, you know, in it, he talks about shooting bullets and then cannons. And it's like, for me, that's my philosophy. It's like, you know, if anything, I had to learn to create a methodology for filtering ideas. And I actually teach it. It's called RICE. And it's a simple scoring system for reach, impact, confidence, and ease. Because if not, then I can be too quick because I have a team of 100 people. So like I can be really like disruptive, you know, where I'm like shooting from the hip and like got this idea, call this person. And, you know, they're busy on like quarterly rocks. And I'm like, go do this. And they're like, oh, the CEO just called, like I'm supposed to do this. And then the manager calls me and I'm just like, okay, I gotta stop doing that. So I had to like protect my team from me, but that is 100% one of the things that I think a lot of people lack is just taking action. Right. And like in the book, I actually teach this framework called the perfect week. Because you talked about it, Andy. You said when my day is back to back, I get so much done. Well, what I do is I design this framework to say if this block of things, themes, thematics, reoccurring meetings and structure happens, then that was an awesome week, right? And in it has, you know, Tuesday night's my night off, right? Hang out with the boys. Thursday night's date night, you know, work out at the gym every day, like kid days and family and one-on-ones and all these things and business stuff and strategic thinking and like meditation and all. So if this happens, then I won. So it's like, I know myself. So because of that, like all the structure people see, if you follow me for a while, Andy, I almost have to do it or I would be like the other night we had a dinner with a bunch of homeless people is what most people call them. We call them the unhoused, right? In our community. Big part of my wife and I's kind of like philanthropic work and just like, you know, being involved. And a long time ago, man, I was talking to a friend of mine and he said to me, he's like, the difference between a successful entrepreneur and a drug addict and a homeless person or unhoused is very little. You talked about it earlier, Andy, like you learn how to channel the addiction into a positive instead of a negative. And I'll never forget that. So for me, I almost had to create a lot of this structure to protect myself, protect the people around me from me, and use that as almost like a forcing function to refine, right? So that my default now didn't become that and like restructure my myelin. Like it's funny because like I used to have severe ADHD. I was on medication for 20 years and now I don't. And I haven't done a test, but I don't know if I have it anymore. So I think there is the ability to reprogram our mind, especially if you're diligent about it, especially have intentionality about it. And you create these new neural pathways, right? So that's what JFDI is for me. It's like, never forgetting the things that made you successful, but also understand what the downside is. And the one thing is, it's like when something resonates with my soul, I just look at it as like, God speaking to me and saying like, that's the path, right? It's like, and we see it all the time. We're like sitting next to somebody and something pulls on your heart and says like, you should say hi to that person. You're like, whoa, what? Why would I sat next to people all day, but not, for some reason, I feel like I should say hi to this person. Like, do it and just keep pulling on those strings. And I think that's where magic happens. That's where you feel like, okay, how did this all come together? Because this doesn't make sense. I had this vision for my life and now it happened. It didn't happen the way I thought it happened, but I'm living this vision. Craziness.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing that the other reason why I really enjoy like watching what you're doing, seeing what you're doing is you're always positive and people are always gravitate to positive people. For me, last few years has been a big struggle for me for like mindset. So that's what I keep coming back to is, language, right? Language is such a big determination, especially your internal speak on, how not only like how your day is going to go, but how your relationships are going to go, how your business is going to go, all these different things. If you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh shit, it's 6 a.m. My stupid alarm went out. I got to get out of bed. It's a little cold. And, you just start like flipping through all the negative things, then your day is going to end up that way because you're starting on that wrong foot. So one of the other things that I think that you do really well, and I don't know about if you talk about this at all in the book. I assume you do because you there's a lot of the stuff you cover is with this is in terms of business in the business world, poverty language and prosperity language, right? And I just watched a video. I think you might have put it up recently. That was like you talk about even writing out your goals for the year, instead of like, I want to achieve X, Y, and Z, you said, I'm going to achieve, like you're already putting that intention in the language when you put that out into the world.
Yeah, possession. It's actually, I have, like, I already have this. Like, you got to write it as if it already exists, right? You're I'm a big fan of like, spirituality in the universe and like, probably what most people consider woo-woo, but like, it's just real. I'm not going to even defend it anymore. Like, energy is real. If you don't believe that, you're silly. You got some levels of self-actualizations to go up on. And
the metachlorines, right? The metachlorines are real.
Yeah.
I agree.
But what happens is your mind thinks and executes in pictures, right? Like, there's real science. The very simple one is you have this thing called the reticular activating system that is the filtering of all the sensory, right? Like, most people don't realize that if you accepted all the sensors going off in your space, you would have a religious experience. If that thing went away, it would feel like the ultimate oneness, because, people don't realize like how much light and information and sound and noise that your brain is actually processing. So what happens is your brain uses imagery to like set priorities of what's important to you. So when you use these possessive statements of like, I have $10 million in my bank account, it's not I will, it's your brain visualizes $10 million in bank. You literally will. If I say that, Andy, I don't know what bank you use, but you'll go to your Chase or your RBC or whatever country you're in, and you'll like visualize a $10 million balance in there and all the zeros. And like, if you do that, then all of a sudden your reticular activating system the RAS looks for opportunities in your day and your decisions and your to-do list that align with that, right? And it's literally almost like a filtering and a ranking process that's starting to happen automatically, right? It's a lot of people, if they're like about to buy a new red Civic or whatever, some car, all of a sudden now they see them everywhere. Well, they were always there. You just didn't have your RAS focused on it, right? So when you start getting crystal clear in imagery, visualizing that future. And here's a cool one for people if you want to get even nerdy on this stuff. Anxiety is based on a low energy forecast of a future that never happened. Depression is based on a low energy history that just isn't true anymore. And fulfillment only happens when your daily actions align with the vision that you've set for your life. And when you don't have that, that's when you're not happy. So if somebody wants to get from a depressive anxiety, self-limiting belief state and amplify that, just start doing the things that you know your higher version of yourself in the future would be doing today. Right. And if that's showing up on time and making those calls and going to the gym and reading the book and, you know, feeding your mind positivity and saying no to a friend for that weekend barbecue invite because you know that nothing good is going to come from it. Like when you start acting today aligned with that future person you know you could become, your emotions completely change. You literally vibrate at a different level.
Yeah, absolutely. So what somebody just told me recently is one of the things that they did is they like knew that they wanted like a Tesla or whatever the car was, and they said what they did is they went to the dealer and sat in the car. Yeah, and that sounds like silly to people, but exactly what you're saying is they sat in the car and they visualized, okay, this is me, closed their eyes, like, okay, this is me driving this car, right? So I think
that's not silly.
Again,
if people think that's silly, that's crazy. That is exactly how you should do it. Here you want to know like next level. I want to teach shit people nobody's ever heard of. Okay. My password was my physical body. Like literally I wrote the password to my laptop of what I would weigh in my body fat percentage and my strengths. Okay. My VO2 max. It was part of the password. Okay. So when you start adding it to activities you may do a dozen times a day, when you visit the place, like you said, go another level further. Don't watch YouTube videos unless it's about Tesla reviews and Tesla owners and Tesla people and Tesla communities and go to the Tesla meetups and go find the local people that own Teslas and make friends with those people. Like, take it to that level, right? I'm doing a lot more private aviation. And is it a surprise that most of my friends now own their own jet? No, it's because I made that part of a decision to like bring that into my life and be around it and get comfortable with it and ask the questions that I just wasn't clear on to program my mind to find opportunities to get those outcomes, right? Recently, my buddy Keith, I was with him 2 weeks ago, and he's always wanted a Lamborghini. And he just financially, it just never made sense. He's doing really well, but it's just like, he's got kids and a family and I just told him, I was like, keep putting it out there. Like you've got a Lamborghini mindset, like just like be there, own it, blah, blah, blah. Crazy story. This guy, I think his name's like Lambo Dad on Instagram. I don't want to call him out because he might get a bunch of messages, but this guy on Instagram was following my buddy, loved his content, and wanted his car in California where my buddy lived and offered to ship the car there so he could keep in his garage so that when he was in town, he could use it there, and said he could use it anytime he wants.
Oh my gosh.
And I share this because people confuse the outcome with the effort. They focus on the what, and then they get stopped by the how. And I'm telling you, go to that place, allow yourself to dream. I talk about it in the book. It's chapter 13, 10X vision map. Allow yourself to have a 10X vision for your life in all areas and be okay that if you hold that truth, because I really think, when people talk about manifestation or whatever, I'm not going to discuss, you have to take massive action, like 100%. But here's what manifestation truly means. At what degree out of 100 do I believe? And to what degree out of 100 minutes per day was I able to hold that truth of a future at a 10 out of 10? So let me explain that. 10 out of 10 belief. Like, do you truly believe this? Like certainty to a level, like it will 100% happen. I don't care about the timeline. It will happen. I'm willing to do the work. It will eventually happen. I will make it happen. Are you a 10 out of 10? And then every minute of the day, if I asked you, were you able to hold that belief at a 10 out of 10? To the degree that you make those two elements 10 out of 10 in your day is the speed you're going to pull that forward into your life. And I'm sure you've never heard that from anybody.
That's absolutely epic. And I mean, it's one of the things that I've done recently, which has made a big impact, is something as simple as curating my YouTube viewing, right? So now instead of, I'm one of those people who get sucked into politics, right? And it's rotten. It's so rotten. And I just have to like purge myself of that. So now my playlists are, people like you, and then people like Eric Thomas, and it's all positivity. It's all pushing me in the right direction at night when my wife and I sit down. It's rare that we ever put on any type of entertainment. Now it's it's mindset. It's all these things. And another thing is, it came back to something I had watched from you years ago. That was, you said garbage in, garbage out, right? Like, if you're watching all this garbage, flipping through TikTok and seeing all these girls with their booties shaking, like, great. You're numbing yourself for that 15 minutes to cure yourself from this perceived boredom, which doesn't exist. If you actually had a goal, had some plans, had some intention on your day, had a stacked calendar, then you're not going to do those things. So I absolutely love that. One last thing before I hand it over to Amy real quick is aviation. It's so funny, Dan, because the more I learn about you, the more I laugh, because I was an air traffic controller for 13 years. I built all my software stuff in the Bay Area, till for doing it and mood lighting and stuff. But it's funny how I think a lot of maybe age-wise too, we're similar in age. It's a crazy, curious journey.
Yeah, on the consumption, and I actually think social media is a beautiful platform if you curate, right? Like, my social feeds are awesome, like pure gold, like motivational, inspirational, just incredible stuff. All platforms, TikTok, Instagram, etc. And to the point where, like, a long time ago, probably 10 or 9 or 11 years ago, I had to politely ask my family members that when they come into my home, that there's no conversations about the news. There's only conversations about things you're currently working on, or things or ideas about the future that you want to work on that's exciting you. Anything that sounds like the news is kindly requested to not. We had a sign when you walked into our house that I probably should put back up. It said, I got it from Oprah. She says, "You're responsible for the energy you bring into my home." And people understood where I was showing up. And if you tried to show up with that kind of like crappy attitude and behavior, it was just a politely like, "Hey, you got to go reset. And when you're ready, you can come back, but I'm just not going to have it." Like, I have probably to a fault, Andy, like, I don't know about other people, but like, I have no, my candidness level is pretty high. My need for being accepted is like 0. I don't care. I just understand what I need and what and the people I love, what I want to create for them. And if people show up without that, I'm very like, I understand, right? I'm not upset about it, but I'm not going to accept it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just just to follow up on that. So one of my favorite quotes, which is, it goes right around that line, is Dr. Seuss, right? It's like, be who you are, say who you feel, because those who don't mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind, right? I feel like that's I'm the exact same way. Unfortunately, I have kind of a potty mind, so I get in trouble for that. But it comes with the territory. Better to be real.
I love it. I love it. And everything, I was just messaging Andy while you were talking. I was like, I love this soapbox. We could stay on this soapbox all day. And, want to add just how important it is that your heart is connected to those manifestations. Because when the heart and mind are connected, man, it's powerful. I love it. So we have a question for you, Dan. What would you say is your superpower?
I think the thing that I just have an innate ability for is to process a lot of information and then restructure it in a way that other people can understand. Right. And I think there's a lot of people in the world that have that, but just like, I'm able to like consume multiple books and like, and I'm a self-help junkie. Like I spent probably $300,000 last year on just personal development and like, courses. I buy everything, like Black Friday, like whatever, just buy it, put it in the login, and eventually I'll process it. And, but what I do is I like take that and I like put it, like you said, into my words in a structure that makes sense. And usually I try to find ways to make it mnemonic and like repeatable and like easy to understand. And I think that came from just like building software, like talking to clients and trying to reverse engineer their needs and like create the data structure and the presentation layer and all these things. It's just one of the things that I do incredibly well. And retention. Like my dad always says, like, how do you remember all this stuff? And I'm like, I don't know. I think it's just because I absolutely love it and I care about people. And I know that if I can remember it, I can add a lot of value to people's lives. So like there's a part of the I really care. So I pay attention when I hear and read and understand stuff. And I write it down and I like have structure for recall and like try to lock it in that that I put it into a process.
I love that. Yeah. I'm the same way with self-help stuff. You know, I just went to my first Tony Robbins UPW and I bought everything and then paid more for in-person stuff. And I was like, and people are like, well, you know, I was there with a couple friends and they were like, you know, wow, you bought everything. I was like, yeah, I'm investing in me. I can bring way more value. You know, I never have regretted that. Not once have I ever regretted investing in me. So I love that. It's so powerful.
That's beautiful. You cannot go wrong with Tony Robbins. Like world class guy's been doing it for 40 years, consistent. Like everybody should be inspired by the amount of value that humans brought to the world. It's beautiful.
For sure.
All right, Dan. Well, we would love to keep you for another hour, but we promise to only keep you for an hour. So just to wrap it up here, we always try to end with some fun stuff. So one of the things I would love to know is, if you could have lunch with any of these three Canadians, which one would you pick? Would it be Jordan Peterson, Seth Rogen, or Ryan Reynolds?
Those are all very tough. Wow. I'm tossed up between Jordan Peterson and Ryan Reynolds. I would probably take Ryan Reynolds.
It's a good choice. I think I'd agree with you there. I love Jordan Peterson, but he's a little heavy.
I can read.
I
can read his thoughts. Ryan, I'd want to double click on some of the stuff I'm watching to understand his thinking.
What's cool is he just spun up that digital marketing. I mean, he's an amazing entrepreneur.
He's clever. Yeah. He's on the same path as The Rock and others. So like he's
super
awesome.
Clever. Yeah, and then he had that aviation gin and all that. Yeah, he's good stuff. All right, so a couple of things is, where can people find you?
Yeah, so if you want to buy the book, buybackyourtime.com. Go there. I redirect you. It's on all the different places. I would just ask one thing. If I've ever created value for you and you read the book, can you please leave me a review? Amazon, that is the game changer for me. I'm starting a movement. I want to create a snowball and it requires support. And that's the best thing you could ever do if I've ever done anything for you and you're listening to this. And then danmartell.com, 2 L's Martell, if you want to learn about, SAAS Academy or coaching or investing or be redirected to all my different socials. But I'm Dan Martell on most socials. But yeah, buybackyourtime.com is my passion project for the world.
Love it.
So
Dan.
excited to read it.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
well, thank you guys.
Absolutely.
And we're.
Oh, it looks like we might have lost Amy.
We lost Amy. Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody listen to the podcast. If you haven't done so yet, please rate, review, subscribe, share it out. You're definitely going to want to share this episode. If you haven't seen some of the other great people that we've had on, go and do some search. Dan is definitely, I think I'm going to give Dan the top 3, if not the top spot on people we've had on. So Dan, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. You've been a major influence in my life. My wife has been, kind of going down that trail now too. So really enjoying your
What's
content.
her name?
If you don't, Molly.
Tell Molly I said hi and I would love to meet her someday.
Absolutely. If you're ever in Idaho, so we moved to Idaho from California. We were in the Bay Area and we moved to, Let me wrap the podcast up real quick. Thank you guys for joining us and we'll see you next time on the Seller Roundtable.
All right. Andy, I do have to jump because I'm 3 minutes late for another podcast.
No worries.
But I meant that with Molly. Are you guys near Boise?
Yeah, we're in Idaho now. Yeah, we're in Boise. So right near ClickFunnels. So,
you're in Boise. Okay, cool. I'm planning a trip.
Well, we're in a suburb.
Okay.
Yeah, well, please come. We'll go snowboarding. Yeah, we'll go snowboarding. We'll hang out and you can meet my 2 boys and my little girl.
Sounds good.
All right, Dan.
All right, Andy. Have a great day, man.
All right. Take care, buddy. Hey, good luck with the puppy.
Cheers.
All right. Bye-bye.